So hi everyone. I've been using computers for over 10 years and even studied hardware and software. And I still don't know all the details about how to debug. But there are a lot of details, and I think the thing to start with to make sure that everyone's on the same page is just the architecture of an operating system. Basically we'll go through all the details of how to debug things, and hopefully we'll get things solved as quickly as possible. But it might take a little bit more time, and you might have to sleep on it at least a day to solve it. Thanks. So I'm just going to jump right in here and do an actual real debug. And basically we're going to start studying the console and system log messages. I'm going to just add a couple of tools to your toolbar here. For example, terminal, and then I have activity monitor, I have a console, and then I have system information and also system preferences of debugging tools that you might use. And what I would like to recommend is just turning these on and then doing whatever you're doing to try to see what the problem is. So basically this is the activity monitor. Right here is the console or system log listing all the logs and details of what problems might occur. And you can also see all messages or just the errors and faults. And then here is a system command called top, just run from the terminal. And then I have the CPU history, and then just a quick little per CPU indicator. So we're going to go through each of these to see what terminal top may work. So you first want to start a terminal, and then once you get to the terminal, just type in TOP, and something like this should pop up. If you want to exit, you hit Control C and you can exit. And then if you want to find out more about any kind of application, so you might see a process or some other name of something, you just type in MAN for manual and then say top, and then you'll show a page like this, and you can kind of scroll with your mouse or arrow keys and kind of look through all the details of top. And if you want to exit from this, you press Q and you can exit, and then type in top again, and you can go back to top and see what your processes are. And you can even sort top by here I have it sorted by CPU usage. You can sort it by memory or some other ways as well. On how the console works here, so what you want to do is basically click on the new messages, and that will, or now messages, and then it will take you to the latest messages. So at the bottom here is the latest message. And then you can also see your most recent crash reports, so if there's any applications that have crashed, and then your general system log, which will basically list every message. So here you can see there's a number of different events that happen, and I'll basically click down here to see what the latest messages are. And here's kind of a highlight of some of the locations of some of these key ideas for the console system log. How to use the activity monitor and what's going on here. So there's a number of different things going on. I sorted this by CPU, and you can basically click on any of these top things. So for example, if you're concerned about memory, you can click on memory and sort it by memory, and you can see that this is the top memory usage. And you can also do bytes written or read, and this is to the hard drive. And there's a number of other things that you can add. If you right click on this, you can click and select which other ones you have. These are the main ones that I would recommend using. And then you can also study the memory, and that works basically, sorry about this, so you can sort it by memory and bring this over here and basically sort, and then also see the number of threads. So if you're concerned about threads, and so on. Or if you're concerned about energy impact, you can click on energy. You can see the profile over time as well, and battery levels. And then disk usage is also important to see, and you can kind of see how many bytes have been written or read, and then you can see the network profile here, and this will be bytes sent or received, or packets, which is basically the same thing. Each packet includes a number of bytes. And you can basically sort these through. And then what you can do is you can click on view, and then you can select your update frequency. I'm doing very often, so that takes a lot more CPU usage. You can see it's one of my right here, activity monitor. If you sort this by CPU usage, you can see it's basically taking up 60% of the CPU, so that's quite often. I might just, if I'm really struggling with a problem, I might click on every 5 seconds. You can also sort it by hierarchy, which is helpful. So for example, you can see here which process. So basically you have the main kernel running, and then you have the launcher, and then the activity monitor, and then a bunch of other individual processes. So basically what's going on here, when you sort it by hierarchy, you can see like Windows Server or Activity Monitor, it basically has say 5 threads, and each one of those should be listed underneath, and so on, or the number of threads for each sub-process, and then also memory for each of those processes or threads. And this is basically how Activity Monitor here of what's going on with the console. So essentially what we're looking at here is the console, which is the Unix system log. So it basically lists all the error messages or faults, or even just regular messages, and basically you might want to click now here, and that will list the latest. It will bring you to the latest events. And basically there's 2 types. You'll see different colors here. So here is a fault, and these are errors. And then in the details, you'll see what the subsystem is. Sometimes it will list more details, or you can see that right here it shows process, and that will correspond to the name of the process. So you'll see the process name here in the activity monitor, or you can look at your top and see what the process was here, and basically study that. So and then if you want to actually select you see how it moved up there, that's basically because new messages came in. And if I want to click now, then it'll take me to the bottom, and I can monitor it in real time. And this is very helpful. So as you're using your application, you can kind of monitor and look at it and see what's going on, if there's any errors or faults. And you can even select them and do watch a particular one, and it will add it to up here, and you can delete it or remove it. Hardware, what you want to do is click here, and then about the, and once you click on that, you'll get a screen that looks like this. You can either click one of these 2 options. So basically it's either the system report or the software update. On the system report, you can basically see all your system details, including details about your memory, for example camera, Bluetooth, and then a lot of other things in hardware, and then also your network settings, and also details on software. So if you don't like to use the command line, you can just go ahead and take a look at a lot of the network details this way as well. So basically a computer is made up of hardware and an operating system and a lot of other software, and typically the problem is some kind of other software. So basically people use computers a lot, and typically developers that develop the operating systems and hardware typically do their best to make sure that everything is absolutely and totally and completely perfect. However, sometimes there's bugs with operating systems, so it's always a good idea to make sure that you update your operating system and make sure that all the bugs are repaired before doing anything, and certainly even call up a local friend that knows better, that you can just ask some basic, simple questions to, and start with that. So here's a basic diagram of what's going on. Basically, you have your CPU, and then you have your hard drive and memory and software. So you basically have input and output, and then everything going in to your CPU. So there's probably nothing wrong with your CPU, nothing wrong with your memory, and the problem is probably software, right? So just to kind of review here, we basically have processes, we have threads, we have memory, and we're basically using the activity monitor to study what's been going on in the details of a debug process. So the problem is basically figuring out which one of the processes on your computer is the problem. And here's kind of a quick definition basically of what a process is. So process is basically something that's executed by the operating system or by you, and then it's made up of threads, and it basically has memory. So the possible problems are basically usually something with taking up too much memory, or it could be just excess time in terms of how much it's taking use of your CPU. So yes, it's very important to understand how processes work, how threads work, how your networking works with various ports, but it's also important to understand the memory and basically the memory architecture or memory management. So basically, an operating system is partitioned into basically where the core elements are, or your kernel are, and then it basically has memory management where your applications are run in a different area than where your operating system is typically run, and that's basically segmented. So basically when you have a crash, it doesn't crash your whole operating system, it just crashes the application. And so typically you want to make sure that your memory is clean as possible. And I'm sorry about this. And basically when I say clean as possible, I mean use as little memory as possible. For example, sometimes one web browser window can take up as much as 100 megabytes of memory. As you look at a lot of processor and CPU diagrams and just images of what is really going on in an operating system, you'll realize that memory is kind of a super important concept, and it's basically almost everything. So kind of an overview here of how the memory activity monitor works. So basically in green here you can see that there's something called physical memory. That's the total memory that you have on your computer, and then the memory used. You basically want to make sure that you have as little memory used as possible. So in light blue there, if you circle all the memory there, and add that up, you basically get the total memory used, and you can compare that to your physical memory or the memory pressure. So that's the little red line there. So memory problem, what you do is you can go into your activity monitor and see what's going on. So you can sort it by memory, and here you can see that I have one application in particular using almost 3 gigabytes. And my particular system only has 16 gigabytes of RAM on the motherboard. So you can also see some other applications as well, console using quite a bit, and Windows Server, perhaps for the display and things like this. This process, so I know what iMovie is doing, but Windows Server I might be interested in. So click on Windows Server, and then there's this icon for info, and you can inspect it. So a couple things about this. It shows the CPU load here, which is great, and then you can see the memory size, and also some statistics. So the number of threads is important to see, the ports, the amount of CPU time that's being used up, total, and so on. So basically you can see the parent process. This is the one that launched it, and some other details. And you can even sample the process if you'd like, to kind of monitor and see some more details about it. Go in and look at all your memory and basically see. So you can see there's some things I can do nothing about, and there's other things I can do something about, right? So I can see that here is a web page, here's another web page open, each one of these being about 100 megabytes each. That can quickly add up a lot. So I might go back and close some of these applications. Or if there's something that I'm particularly interested in, I can go and see exactly what's going on with that just by clicking on info here. The process looks like. You can basically see what the name of the process is. That was the one that I originally selected and I wanted to take a look at. And then you can kind of see the call graph. And what a call graph basically is it starts with the main thread and then each of the other sub-processes. So imagine you have a function that calls another function, and so on. And that's basically what the call graph is. It's pretty helpful to see what's going on with that. Debugging some type of problem with your hard drive or disk, you might go into your activity monitor and then you click on disk here, and then you can sort things by bytes written. So usually the problem is writing, not reading, because it basically takes longer to write than it does to read something from your hard drive. And then if you just click on this here, you can sort it and see what's going on. So here you can see I have something that's written already, a gigabyte of data, and then you can also see the process ID and the other different system tasks as well. So if you're interested in checking your hard drive, you can do that with something called the disk utility, and here's an example of how to do that. You basically go into disk utility and run it, and it should say everything is okay. I wouldn't do too much more than that, but basically just do the first aid. So let's study in detail how we would go about studying a network problem. As you should really know about when you're trying to debug a networking problem. And the first, I would say, is a trace route. So what I can do here is just do a trace route to wikipedia.org and show you what that does. And that basically shows the network path. Okay, so it's basically starting up here and doing a trace route, and it's going to my local router first there, and taking a little bit of time, unfortunately, so maybe there's some type of network problem that we're actually experiencing. And if you're upset with that, you can close that out. Usually it will show, you can hit Control C and cancel that. And then I might just say ping my router here, right? So 192, and your number might be different. But sometimes if you can do a full trace route, it will show you what that is. So it looks like my router is able to ping. And basically what that's doing is just sending a little data packet to that. And you can kind of see the delay starting up initially at 22 milliseconds and 3 milliseconds. So that's fairly typical. I'm on a wireless connection here, and I'm just going to cancel that. So I'm going to try another trace route to Wikipedia again. If I just do up arrow key, I can do that as well. And still taking some time. So anyway, you can see that I basically have some type of problem heading out here. So one thing I often like to do is to look at a visual trace route, and what you can do is type in here. I did a visual trace route map and just looked for different tools on the internet that do visual trace route. Don't install any software, just use visual trace route on the internet, or you can type it in on the command line like we were trying to do, which is just trace route space whatever the address is that you're looking for. Internet, you might really like this website called submarinecablemap.com here. It's pretty awesome, and what you can do is you can click on, say, one of these hosts and or locations, and it'll basically list and give you the details about what's going on with that internet connection there. And this is basically for all over the world. It's really awesome and great, and you can see how the internet traffic might work, at least on fiber optic cabling. Is this ns lookup command. It basically looks up what the IP address is of a website. So here I typed in ns lookup wikipedia.org and hit enter, and it did a lookup for me. It showed me also what I'm doing in terms of my local server as well, which is kind of nice. And even a port number that I was connecting to. So just a little quick NS lookup. And another one you might try is who is, and you can do the same thing, wikipedia.org, and type that in, and you'll get a whole lot of domain name registration information. For example, if you have to contact the person or of a particular website. What your networking is doing on Mac, you can click on your wireless here and open network preferences. It takes a moment, and then you can kind of see what's going on here with your network. If you click advanced, you can go through and see all your wireless settings. If you click TCP/IP, right here it'll show you your local IP address and then your router's IP address. And sometimes if you have specific settings for these others, you can see that as well. But basically the most important thing to know about would be your local IP address and maybe your router's IP address. And then sometimes you have a gateway that is very important to know about as well. And that IP address can sometimes change depending on what kind of internet connection you have. Your internet settings is this command ifconfig-a for all, and then I'm piping it into more. So you don't have to do all that. You could just type in ifconfig-a or just ifconfig like this. But I'm going to do this with more because there's a lot of information here. And basically you can see what's going on, and if you hit space you can get the next screen, and then you can scroll up to see later on what's going on. But basically this will be more details, and you can kind of see your local IP address. It says 27001, which is kind of default number. And then you can see your various Ethernet cards here. So here's actually my IP address for my card, and then you can kind of see the other details if there was other Ethernet cards or bridges or more complicated settings. That's basically all listed in here. And typed another trace route, so I went in and I typed trace route to google.com. And for some reason that comes up a little bit faster. Google has a lot of different servers all over the world, whereas Wikipedia maybe doesn't. Anyway, and you can see the little star indicating a little bit of a delay there. And there's 3 readings here on each one of these trace routes. And you can hit Control C, and then you can type in man for manual trace routes, and that will give you all the details about how traceroute works. But specifically, I think I remember here that one is kind of the average delay, and one is so on. So you can take a YouTube stream, and I'd rather be in Rio de Janeiro right now than debugging, so I just got a video playing. You can kind of see what's going on. So right here you can see the packets, and basically you could also do that by data, which is kind of interesting. So packets and data. So packet is one transfer, and then each packet includes various amounts of data. So you might want to look at data, and then here you see data received and data sent. And packets in and packets out. And basically, if you have a lot of packets out, you might be concerned about that. Maybe some tool is trying to do something that it shouldn't. And you can compare that with your packets in. So typically, you should have more packets in than packets out. And you can kind of look at that relative to all of your data received. So on this side, I have this sorted by sent bytes, but we might do that on received bytes as well, because typically if there's a problem, it's going to be on a send side, because it's probably with our computer, not what's being received. And you may want to have a firewall to protect yourself from what's being received. So here you can see Safari is running and YouTube is playing, and it looks to be going pretty good. It looks like it probably queued up here and stopped downloading because it had enough data already from the video feed. You basically connect up with a port. So each service has a different port. They're usually done on TCP. So for example, the web port is port 80 here, but there's a whole lot of other ports for different applications, and you may want to just check to see if your application is using a correct port and if anything looks suspicious in terms of networking. I try is something called netstat, and I'll just show you what that's like. So if you run netstat, you just type netstat, and it'll quickly print out something like this. So you might do this piped into more, and then you can kind of read. And basically here it shows you the local address and the foreign address. So it basically shows you the details about where things are connecting to and from, as well as the ports and some other details that I had. So what you want to do is unlock it here, and I don't recommend doing this kind of stuff unless you talk with someone who really knows what they're doing. Even I don't really know what I'm doing, but there's a lot of details here. So sometimes you'll see different services. The problem I had was one of the location services kept accessing my location, and I uninstalled the app, but for some reason it couldn't get access to removing it from here. So I had to like manually go in and remove it. And even here you can see I have no idea what this data detector's view service is. I can't click on it, can't do anything about it. I can probably do that and it somehow disappears, and not even sure what that has done, right? So just an example of a little bug here you can see in real time. And here's basically a very simplified example of how the internet might work. You have the internet vaguely out there, and then it's connected to a bunch of routers, and there's servers, and then you're basically connecting up to a server somewhere out on the internet, and you have your computer connected up to a switch or a wireless hub or something like this. So there's a couple ways to access your security settings. What you can do is you can go into your system preferences and then just type in the word security, or you can click on this. And once you click on the security settings, you'll come to a screen that looks like this, and you can basically go through and make sure things look simple and easy to understand. And in the general tab, you can see that there's you can select your requiring your password or not, and so on. But most of the details are in here, and believe it or not, it can be extremely dangerous, so be careful. So macOS and Linux in general keeps track of all your keychains and passwords, and you can access that through this keychain access, and I'll bring up a window that looks something like this. And there's several different items here. So you have basically your keychains for your login, system, and system roots, and then you have basically each of these. So you can select these. I'm not really going to go into a whole lot of detail here. You should just pretty much write it down and study them in detail and find out what's going on. It modified, so if you want to see the most recent ones, you can sort it this way. And probably the ones that are most recent are being used, and these other ones are not as used, so you can kind of study them from that perspective. Items here, and then you have your password keys, and some of these are just for various logins, for example Google and so on, and it shows nicely when it was last modified. And then you also have this one, which is keys or local keys, and then there's certificates used by different websites. So basically, when you log into a website, it sends you a encryption key and one that kind of matches with your local computer and one that matches on their computer, so that the encryption works, and that is all stored in this As you may be aware, Mac OS has some startup key combinations. So when you restart your computer as it's powered off and then turns on, you can hit Command and then R, and then that will take you to a recovery screen. So it's really good to know about MAN. It's just MAN. It's a terminal command line program, and you can basically look up all these different types of user commands. You can even look up various functions and programming code. You can also look up just various system tools, and also, most importantly, the daemons, which are basically your various processes running on your computer, and find out details about what's going on. So you basically type in MAN and then space whatever you're looking for, and that could be almost anything. And you may want to remove all your applications individually and make sure you do a software update. Anyway, so that's all, folks. Hope it's been super helpful, and let me know if you have any questions, and be sure to try to help others in the process. You'll have a lot of fun, learn a lot, and you'll even look totally awesome on the internet by helping others solve their problems. Anyway, I hope you've really had some fun trying to learn more about computers and operating systems and all the details involved with debugging your system. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. Maybe can't exactly solve all the problems in the world, but surely I will do my best to try to help you out.